Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy this video, we invite those of you who haven't yet done so, to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the notification icon, to be notified when the next one is uploaded. We enjoy reading all comments, whether positive or negative, because it is very important to ventilate both sides of any issue. All we ask is that you observe the YouTube community guidelines. Today we will be showing how Lewis Hamilton's resurgence, and subsequent entry into the title race, has exposed the big con that F1 have been running this season. This con is in furtherance of the big con of Abu Dhabi 2021, and the subsequent cons that Max Verstappen's two budget cap exceeding back-to-back titles of 2022 and 2023 were. The 2024 con is predicated on selling the fake narrative that F1 is becoming more competitive, even as they are shepherding Max to a contrived fourth title. This con, which is being carried out in plain sight, by Liberty Media with the connivance of F1, FIA, and the F1 media, has been blown wide open by Sir Lewis joining the title race. Any consumer of Formula One will have heard the fake narrative that this season is more competitive, because there have been so many different race winners, 7 to be exact. This is a superficial argument that attempts to equate different winners to more competition, in order to mask the fact that halfway into the season, Max is the runaway leader, who is so far ahead of his nearest challenger that the second half of the season is a mere procession. He has won over half of all the races, and all the other races have been won by different drivers. This has enabled him to open a 76-point lead over his closest competitor, which is quite a significant gap given that a race winner gets 25 points. Verstappen's contrived titles sit oddly with his notoriety for the most crashes during close combat driving. It's a bit like giving the best striker award to a footballer during a tournament who is notorious for missing the most chances, but scored the most goals from dubious penalty awards, where the goalkeeper was sent off before he takes every penalty. Verstappen's contrived record of dominance sits oddly with his notoriety for the most crashes during close quarter racing, so where does the dominance come from? Well, that's easy. Because of the challenges of 2021, the competition was suppressed in 22 and 23, as his budget cap exceeding car was quite a lot faster than the others, so there was little or no opportunity for close quarter racing, hence the boring accusation. And despite the unfair car advantage, he was still being protected by the FIA anyway, because if you recall in the early races in 2022, when they were still perfecting their con, Max was repeatedly losing out to Charles in close quarter racing for the brief period that the Ferrari was competitive. But during such encounters he was openly and shamelessly calling on the FIA for assistance. His protected status and the FIA's corruption has been repeatedly exposed by their repeated failure to sanction him properly. Max himself inadvertently admitted that his 2022 and 2023 budget cap exceeding cars were quite a lot faster than the budget capped competition, and we all know about the 2021 theft. Unfortunately for those who are rigging Max to surpass Lewis Hamilton's records, the contrived domination has been so bad for the sport, that this season, they have had to find a way to manage it better. And that is why they came up with the plan that Sir Lewis's resurgence has now blown apart. That plot is still anchored on the stewards, who protect Max on track and ignore Red Bull infractions off track. But this season, they have drafted in Mercedes and McLaren, jointly and severally. You may recall that Mercedes inexplicably withdrew their appeal to the Abu Dhabi theft that McLaren helped to launder. The Mercedes team principal then went on to become Liberty Media's favorite Toto, while his wife became their top female executive. Mercedes's task this season is to handicap Sir Lewis by sabotaging him, and it is public knowledge that they have been doing so enthusiastically, because it aligns with their own goals, as we have set out in previous videos. McLaren's task is to be Max's rear gunner, and this they have been happy to do, as evidenced by the team orders in Hungary and the retraction of the Austrian accusations. Both actions allowed Max to extend his advantage over their own driver, who as his rear gunner, happens to be his nearest challenger. If anyone can recall a situation ever in the history of F1, where a team has implemented orders to allow their championship-leading rival to extend his lead, please post it in the comments section. McLaren had the option to appeal the punishment that was meted out to Verstappen in Austria, but chose not to, despite protesting vigorously and accusing the stewards of being soft on him, especially in 2021, when he was in close combat with Sir Lewis. Never mind that back then, McLaren gave the FIA their nod of approval, and led the efforts to save Marcy. By letting the FIA off for letting Max off, McLaren effectively gave Max a 10-point advantage. So, we move on to Silverstone, where Lando Norris and McLaren opted to cover off against Lewis Hamilton, rather than the runaway championship leader Max Verstappen, and then promptly jumped out of the way to allow Max to chase down Sir Lewis and extend his lead over, guess who? Rather odd behavior for a supposed championship contender, don't you think? McLaren's tactics were becoming so conspicuous that they were starting to look like the proverbial nearly team. They came to Hungary knowing that they had this what might have been reputation, to own or dispel. So, it is rather odd that they would order Lando to yield first position to his teammate, and in the process give away another 7 points to Verstappen. McLaren's reputation as a nearly team is the flip side of their role as Verstappen's rear gunners. So, with Mercedes sabotaging Sir Lewis, and McLaren defending his backside, Max is cruising to his 4th title. But Liberty Media and F1 know how damaging another Verstappen procession would be, so they promoted the fake narrative that so many different winners equaled a more competitive season. To promote a fake narrative, you need an extensive media platform like Liberty Media have. As we have shown in previous videos, you feed the narrative into your platform, and disseminate it through multiple channels. The fake competition narrative was promoted through PA Media, the same anti-Lewis feeder agency, that Toto Wolff is using to smear him as shown in our previous video. Therefore, any notion that this season is competitive because of multiple winners, can be attributed to the Liberty Media propaganda machine's effort to gaslight the public about Verstappen's rigged 4th title. Quite simply, if there was nothing untoward going on behind the scenes, they wouldn't have needed to plant the multiple winners equals competition story, sabotage Sir Lewis, or reverse Lando. Unfortunately for them, the one they went to all this trouble to try and hold down, has broken free and they now have to deal with the consequences. Yes, sirree. Sir Lewis has blown their scheme to pieces, and we can now see all the fragments scattered all over the place. There are many like at Jarson 7344, at Koakenzopi 5919, and at Johan 3182, who probably mocked or sneered when they read our headline declaring that Sir Lewis has joined the title race. So, hold on to your hats, folks. Here we come with the evidence, which we all know is kryptonite to Maxipads. Do you know that there is only one driver that has outscored Verstappen over the last 4 races? Yes, people, the only driver to have done so is the GOAT. Of course, the Ferrari drivers for obvious reasons cannot be party to the scheme, so that only leaves the McLaren drivers ahead of Sir Lewis. As you can see from the table of the top 6 and George Russell, Sir Lewis is the only one to have outscored Max over the last 4 races. Yes, sirree. This is significant because they all know what Sir Lewis is like. Once he's in the mix, he can't be discounted. We have already seen how his resurgence has exposed the con. At Silverstone, Lando was forced to reveal his rear gunner role, when he chose to cover off against Sir Lewis, instead of his championship rival, and then when he couldn't get anywhere near the GOAT, he promptly yielded his position to Verstappen. In Hungary, McLaren would rather cover off against Sir Lewis than promote Lando's championship, thus revealing that they were focused on the team title rather than the drivers. The icing on the cake was Lando's petulant misreading of Sir Lewis's compliment, which revealed that their focus was on him, rather than Max. And of course, Mercedes are struggling to hold Sir Lewis down, as he has repeatedly escaped their sabotage, to leapfrog his teammate. With Sir Lewis in the mix, McLaren, as they have found out, will now struggle to get their drivers to focus on defending Max's backside. They are now struggling to explain their bizarre strategy to an increasingly suspicious public. The McLaren drivers may not be fully aware that they are pawns in a wider game, but Lando may slowly be coming to this realization, given his position as Max's closest rival and what happened to him in Hungary. It is unlikely that he will be so compliant should the Hungary situation arise again, and the public are now starting to question McLaren's interest in the Drivers' Championship. Consequently, it will be increasingly difficult to sell the competitive season narrative if McLaren keep giving points away to the runaway championship leader, because they are focusing on a resurgent Sir Lewis. The FIA, on their part, will continue to suffer reputational damage as they continue to turn themselves inside out to protect Max from himself. Their atrocious decision to let him off with as lenient a sanction as possible in Austria created the pressure which prompted Red Bull to ask Max to give up the position that he had illegally gained at the start of the Hungarian GP. A childish Verstappen had to petulantly remind them that they shouldn't jump before they were pushed, and leave it up to the FIA to do their thing. But going through a synchronized WWE-style close combat with rear gunners McLaren is a different kettle of fish to taking on a resurgent Sir Lewis. Again, as Hungary demonstrated, when towards the end of the race, Verstappen came up against Sir Lewis at exactly the same corner that he lost out to the McLarens, he lost again. But this time around he came off the worse for it, and the FIA again gave him a pass. So, coming up against a resurgent Sir Lewis makes it harder for F1 to protect the fake champion, who is notoriously bad at close-quarters racing. Now that Sir Lewis has escaped the Mercedes shackles and joined the fight at the top, he will be engaging in more close combat duels with Verstappen. Given that Max always loses out, and often gets dumped out of, or down the race as well, coming up against Sir Lewis could prove very costly. It could mean Verstappen not completing enough races, or losing so many points, as to make the title more competitive than Liberty Media would want, or Verstappen can handle. Now that Sir Lewis is in the game, it will be harder for F1 to run game on the public. Now that the GOAT is in the game, it will be harder for the FIA to carry water for Verstappen. Now that the most successful driver is in the game, it will be harder for McLaren to protect Verstappen's rear. Game on. Let us see what will happen if the British Belgian and the Dutch Belgian, who are busy mates, get the opportunity to face off at the Belgian Grand Prix, with a resurgent Sir Lewis on the rise. Forza Ferrari.